Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Zach Markowski, and today I have some excerpts from P.D. Ouspensky's book, In Search of the Miraculous. And the book is largely about George Gurdjieff and his school of thought and his personality typology, but it's also a moment in time in the sense that it was happening in 1917, and a lot of the book takes place in Moscow. And if you're aware of what was happening in history at the time, well, people going crazy, revolution, it's a party, and I mean it, and it's politically correct, and it generally only has one correct answer, one mode of being, one designation, right? It all tends in that direction. So we're talking about statism, right? What's gripped the world now, arguably what runs the world, what's gotten away from man, and what has deselected man, what has destroyed man. This is Greek state territory where Nietzsche writes that if anyone was remotely familiar with the real ignobility and low origin of the state and where it comes from, then they would seek their salvation the furthest from it, because it means devastated peoples, blasted lands, to the victor go the spoils, etc., right? That's the egoism that's driven the state since day one, since its personality types doing their thing. And to lay a little bit of groundwork that Gurdjieff kind of gets into, he says only a conscious egoist can help people. And as a premise, I think he's right, because only a conscious egoist can themselves stand a chance against all the small and mass forces of the world that otherwise just devour a human being, their time, their energy. Someone's always at work for someone else. People are always seeking and needing things from each other, right? You could argue that the constraints of the state have created a intentionally devalued worldwide dependence on one another that assumes that any relationship therein was ever desired in the first place, which is a big ask, and one that was never actually consented to by anyone. It was just assumed and projected, well, all along, right? So getting into it, it starts here where I left off kind of yesterday with the video from Nietzsche on new struggles. You're just talking about not just the idea that, like, oh, there's this thing called knowledge, it's data. Anyone who has it, it means something, it means it's valuable. Gurdjieff is saying, no, it's not about numbers, it's not about conceptions. And a lot of this gets into language, which we're going to see shortly. So, and yet it is man's being. People think that his knowledge does not depend on his being, like the idea that he has senses, intuition, intelligence, thoughts. He put it together himself. He didn't just read a book, right? This is the misconception. People of Western culture put great value on the level of man's knowledge, but they do not value the level of a man's being, and are not ashamed of the low level of their own being. They do not even understand what it means, right? The thought would never enter their mind. And they do not understand that a man's knowledge depends on the level of his being. And part of this, I think, is just personality type and how suspicious and cynical people tend to be. Because, again, intelligent animals know that this world is full of other predatory animals. The problem about the general suspicion of intelligence that goes along with stupidity is that same suspicion and cynicism is exactly what keeps out new and different things, right? That the world, if you look at an individual's projection, what they're basically saying in any given perception is the world can't be what I don't think it is, meaning my ignorance sets my limits and determines what I know. And the idea that, well, in the absence of real knowledge, like things that you intuited through your interactions with people and that you put together in your own thought and your own process, the idea that data is this separate thing or this separate body, or, it's really screwy, but we're going to get into that. So Gurdjieff goes on. As a rule, when people realize they do not understand a thing, they try to find a name for what they do not understand. And when they find a name, they say they understand. But to find a name does not mean to understand. Unfortunately, people are usually satisfied with names. A man who knows a great many names, that is, a great many words, is deemed to understand a great deal. Again, excepting, of course, any sphere of practical activity wherein his ignorance very soon becomes evident. So, this is, to give you an example, there's a part in Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s book Player Piano, where one of the characters is talking to a farmer, and the character is an intellectual, and he's a PhD, and he says, "I'm a PhD," and the farmer goes, "Oh, you're a medical doctor," and he goes, "No, no, doctor of philosophy or whatever," and the farmer goes, "Oh, well, if you're a doctor of philosophy, then I'm a doctor of chicken shit and horse shit and a doctor of cow shit." So, and it kind of encapsulates again the what I would call class divides, attitudes. So, and that's just right. These are layers of understanding, and I'm also going to come around to Emerson here when we get to the end. But unfortunately, people are satisfied with names, yada yada. Okay, it goes on. One of the reasons for the divergence between the line of knowledge and the line of being in life, and the lack of understanding, which is partly the cause and partly the effect of this divergence, is to be found in the language which people speak. These are matters of type, education, class, so many things. This language is full of wrong concepts, wrong classifications, wrong associations, and the chief thing is that, owing to the essential characteristics of ordinary thinking, that is to say, to its vagueness and inaccuracy, every word can have thousands of different meanings according to the material the speaker has at his disposal and the complex of associations at work in him at the moment. People do not clearly realize to what a degree their language is subjective. That is, what different things each of them says while using the same words. So people don't put the same things into the words. Just because two people can mouth the same words does not mean they're speaking to or seeing the same thing. Gurdjieff goes on. They are not aware that each person of them speaks in a language of his own, understanding other people's language either vaguely or not at all. And having in the idea that, oh, by the way, and the idea, the Enlightenment idea, the general public idea, the idea that this can be educated, either just whether it's for economic purposes or other purposes, but the idea that you can spread Enlightenment thinking, that you can, or what's called that, and all these other kind of ghosts and fantasies and words that people tend to project on other people, it's just wrong. It's not how people actually are. They have a capacity for reason and logic and certain forms of thinking, intuiting, and that's kind of their predominant modes based on their personality type, or they have some other configuration therein, but it's not some anything goes territory. It's not, human biology and evolution is not a blank slate, or the idea that the state was so successful in projecting its power to coerce individuals and groups to eventually form this mass formation is not the same as the personality types and how they evolved and predated that that binding of mutually hostile forces. So the whole thing is partially a misunderstanding of types and people and how they interact within group dynamics, larger and smaller substructures. Actually, this conviction has no foundation whatever. The language in which the speaker is adapted to practical life only. People can communicate to one another information of a practical character, but as soon as they pass to a slightly more complex sphere, they are immediately lost, right? Philosophy, psychology, etc. And they cease to understand one another, although they are unconscious of it. People imagine that they see, and I would say, based on types, that in a lot of senses you would see people aren't going to be conscious of it because they're simply not interested. So, which he also gets into. People imagine that they often, if not always, understand one another, or that they can, at any rate, understand one another if they try or want to. They imagine that they understand the authors of books they read and that other people understand them, right? Like the idea that someone else somewhere understands. It's funny that people go looking for teachers or thinking there's going to be some, as Terence McKenna might say, that there's going to be some master guru or geisha there. It's like, no, you're going to find people with paywalls and people who want to uh, give their own egotism to the world and people who want to do those sorts of things. You're going to find people handling all sorts of old new nonsense, all sorts of salesmen, all sorts of people mystified at the most simple, at the most basic what would pass for even miracles or simpletons. And in modern times, that's rationality, logic. If it's not science and power and force, mass forces, then the only thing that's acceptable is some sort of prediction, because otherwise people have nothing to look at to say, oh, that's real, right? So it gets really complicated really quickly. He goes on, this is also one of the illusions which people create for themselves and in the midst of which they live. As a matter of fact, no one understands anyone else. Two men can say the same things with profound conviction, but call it by different names, or argue endlessly together without suspecting that they are thinking exactly the same, or vice versa. You know, some people talk about talking past each other and things like that, and I think eventually you just kind of learn that what it takes to actually be on the level is so rare that the selecting force is super apparent. So in old school, old man wisdom kind of terms, you know, they say things like, oh, he who knows does not say, and he who says does not know, you know, and there's other, and then everything else, again, it's egotism, it's memes, it's psychological warfare, it's religion, it's order, it's control, it's chaos. It's everything rolled into one that people try to reduce down to a simplistic understanding in the form of a word. Two men can say the same words and imagine that they agree with or understand one another, whereas they're actually saying absolutely different things and do not understand one another in the least. The old parable of the three blind men in the dark come to mind. Three blind men in the dark. The first one goes, I'm holding a possum tail. The second one goes, I'm holding a log. The third one goes, I'm holding a cactus. And what they're holding is a giant snake, but each of them is holding a different part of the snake. The one has the tip of the tail, the one has the middle muscly section, and the other one has the teeth sunk in his hand. So goes on. If we take the simplest words that occur constantly in speech and endeavor to analyze the meaning given to them, we shall see at once that at every moment of his life, every man puts into each word a special meaning, right? Which it's within the moment of contextual understanding within someone's perception at a given space and time, either to themselves or as related in dialogue and discourse to other people. And all other mediums come from the basic fact that we're either talking to ourselves or we're talking to someone else. And then we can write that down and then we can create art. But the idea that just because we can create things that delight us doesn't mean that what we think they mean is true. So going from there, let us take the word man and imagine a conversation among a group of people in which the word man is often heard, right? Whether that's the dignity of man, the labor of man, the work of man, the belief of man, the God of man. Without any exaggeration, it can be said that the word man will have as many meanings as there are people taking part in the conversation, right? So they all have their own individual perceptions stemming from their type in relation to their culture, their environment, whoever and whatever they're interacting with or doing. There will be as many different meanings of the word man as there are people taking part, and these meanings will have nothing in common. Right? So think of closer to corralling cats than herding sheep. But it's in large numbers, it takes on new meaning and forms. So in pronouncing the word man, everyone will involuntarily connect with the word of the point of view from which he generally accustomed to regard man, or from which, for some reason or other, he regards him at the moment, right? He might be having a thought that's completely wrong, which imminently in the days to come, he's going to have some revelation. Yeah, he's going to have some revelation where he realizes something profound, right? God can change Coke to Pepsi. He stopped the bullets. He found my car keys. It doesn't matter. One man may be occupied with the question of the relation between the sexes. Then the word man will have no general meaning for him. And on hearing this word, he will first of all ask himself, which, man or woman? Right? Like what general mankind, what does that even mean? It's so general as to mean nothing. So man or woman, another man may be religious, and his first question will be a Christian or a non-Christian. So you know the context of my work, I'm generally speaking of Westerners, Western culture, Christian or non-Christian, Christian or pagan, you know, kind of goes from there. These are all various layers. None of them are strictly one thing. The third man may be a doctor, and the concepts man will mean for him a sick man or a healthy man, and of course from the point of view of his specialty. A spiritualist will think of man from the point of view of his astral body, or of life on the other side, and so on. And he may say, if he is asked, that men are divided into mediums and non-mediums. A naturalist, speaking of man, will place the center of gravity on his thoughts and the idea of man as a zoological type. So again, we start getting into ontologies, teleologies, natural, supernatural, abstract, those kinds of things. And then how then do you orient yourself in such a world if that's what you're positing? And then, obviously getting into the Aristotelian question of, well, what constitutes a good life? And right, it's all a work of art, regardless. Which is to say, in speaking of man, he will think of the structure of his teeth, his fingernails, his facial angle at the distance between his eyes, right? We start measuring man in pieces and parts. A lawyer will see in man a statistical unit. Oh, and he doesn't write this, but a paycheck, or a subject for the application of laws. Oh, there it is. Or a potential criminal or a possible client. A moralist pronouncing the word man will invariably introduce. Now, I will say this about the lawyer profession, because they've been given a lot of shit over the world, but it seems like, just like a surgeon, that while they're usually the worst and most hated thing in the world, that they have one application in which they will make or break you, which is a lot of power to put into a system's hands, right? Remember, a system that was created for these types of people to enact their job. So going on, people do not notice all these contradictions, do not notice that they never understand one another, that they always speak about different things. It is quite clear that for proper study, for an exact exchange of thoughts, right, and this is why pop culture, modern culture is meaningless, because it's a bunch of different people talking about different things with no regard as to who is talking about what and why, the difference between their knowledge and their being, and let's say their role in the larger social structure. Is necessary would mean make it possible to establish what a man actually means, would include an indication of the point of view from which a given concept is taken and to determine the center of gravity of this concept, right? You can find this in what a people values. You can find out what they value by the language they use, not by how they act, because the values will be what they will be regardless of how they act. And then you can kind of see the inverse neurotic core of a culture generally by looking at its fear, whether that's a love of daylight and a fear of nighttime, a love of science and a hatred of chaos and the unknown, fear, right? Just that arguably fear is what's at the center of any concept, because all of arguably the body of knowledge and thinking and intelligence was created, cultured, and kept over time because we could somehow see the intelligence and wisdom of it. The idea being that it's good enough to keep because it protects us from something in the world, or it enables us and empowers us in the world in some manner, right? So when he's talking about gravity, it's not an abstract thing. It's not, it's not I guess it is a question of existentialism, but it spans from top to bottom, the physical body to the abstracts of the mind. So the idea is perfectly clear in every branch of science, right? Because the need to make this clear again, like I did in the last video, is that Platonism was the belief in a superordinate world of perfect numbers and perfect souls, and it just set the bar for an idealism that could forever push and pull us forward. So from there it goes, and it's not that this was limited to Christianity, right? Anywhere it seems intelligent human culture took root, we started having visions and dreams. And what I would say of dreams is that they are humanly created things. So our own creations get away from us and then pull us forward. If you can think of a mother or a father chasing after their children who thinks they control the children, right, for a time, and then eventually the children take over, eventually the parents die. Going on, but there's no universal language. People continually confuse the languages of different sciences and can never establish their exact correlation. And even in each separate branch of science, new terminologies, new nomenclatures are constantly appearing. Think about public and common language, right? That vernaculars are constantly changing, that the dictionary is constantly adapting new sayings, new words, so on and so forth. So new terminologies, new nomenclatures are constantly appearing. The further it goes, the worse it becomes. Misunderstanding grows and increases instead of diminishing, and there's every reason to think that it will continue to increase in the same way, and people will understand one another even less and less. So I've covered Terence McKenna, and he saw that the technologies that were existing at the time and coming into being would further render human beings incomprehensible to each other. Only in, and I would say yes, but only on, again, talking about layers of perception and understanding and different people's ontologies and belief systems, then you can see only in certain configurations, whereas there is a pattern playing out. Hence, we can say things like the eternal return. But the other line of thought runs that the idea that the more we condense information down, the more nodes, the more people and things connected, the more harder it is to understand any meaning, to call any meaning from all this signal, all this noise, right? And then there's questions of, well, at what point in time has humanity ever let such chaos go on unabated or untamed, or, right? So the whole thing becomes about the management thereof. Think about the PSA. Think about even public signs. Think about the most basic danger sign that's a warning to any humanity who comes along of, hey, they're in universal language, or an attempt at universal language. Here is a line you should not cross. Here's something you have to be look out for. So now imagine the masses of humanity growing so big, the government has to create public service announcements to say, don't put razor blades in candy, don't feed your kids hair, don't put plastic on the couches, consume this new product, don't inhale asbestos, right? All these various things, all these do's and don'ts, all these learns and unlearning, learning and unlearning over not just the last few centuries of industrialization, but through millennia of it. So in modern terms, it's like how many people simply vanish or die because they were in too much of a hurry to read the sign. How many people die because they were so caught up in their own world they couldn't properly read the reality around them. Arguably, our species has called itself and learned from itself all along in these directions. So you could argue that that's what the endeavor was supposedly about. But when it gets away from itself and becomes the largest death machine, right, and constrains forces to those ends, right? You can kill yourself here, but not there. This way, not that way. It kind of tells you something. So again, my take is now that is more and more understanding becomes made apparent and available through education, through new understanding, through new struggles, through new problems. We won't become more more hard to understand. We will become easier to understand, including just at the very least our basic psychological types and how we're most affected by certain things like art, propaganda, fantasies, delusions, those kinds of things, versus what can we agree that we're actually seeing take place here. So going on, Gurdjieff says, for exact understanding, exact language is necessary, and the study of systems of ancient knowledge begins with the study of a language which will make it possible to establish at once exactly what is being said, right? So whether it's alchemy or Christianity or any sect or cult or old religious system, they all have their codes, they all have their values, they all have their symbology. From what point of view and in what connection? This new language contains hardly any new terms or any new nomenclature, but it bases the construction of speech upon a new principle, namely the principle of relativity. That is to say, it introduces relativity into all concepts. This is the atomistic age, by the way. Boom, we blew it apart. Nietzsche discusses this in Schopenhauer's Educators I read yesterday, which I didn't read, but he says, what is the most indivisible constituent of a society? And that's getting down to the individual. And he saw that the modern age was a cauldron of atoms ready to blow. So Gurdjieff is saying relativity, they say introduces relativity into all concepts and thus makes possible. So this is also Marshall McLuhan, his territory. He understood that um, through time, the technologies always created a social change. It wasn't that there was some revolution of thought or whatever that then further changed. It's no, that new technologies shape the environment by way of our interaction therein. I'm not trying to say there's separate things actually taking place here. It's, again, hard to put into words without creating an essay on this one concept and endlessly pulling out the details, right? We're talking about details. My conversations on this channel, these are pulling out details. It's not concerned with pedantically arguing which one's right or wrong, right? This is because part of my biggest issue of, again, modern culture is that the range of thought and feeling and sensation is so minimal and so brain dead, is that it inhibits conversation and education and the expansion of consciousness. And that's the purpose of it, actually, right? It's not meant to free anyone or bring democracy or any of these kinds of things that people tend to say um, about the human endeavor, right? It's management. It introduces relativity into all concepts, thus makes possible an accurate determination of the angle of thought. So again, but it's further complexity, rising complexity, makes it harder, not easier, makes the slope steeper, not easier. Everyone tends to say, oh, but we're democratizing technology, thus power. But it also exists on a ramp of sophistication and social networking, which is beyond all such theorizing. So, for what precisely ordinary language lacks are expressions of relativity, right? Because it's a reduction. Culture is a reducing valve. So, when a man has mastered this language, then, with its help, there can be transmitted and communicated to him a great deal of knowledge and information which cannot be transmitted in ordinary language, even by using all possible scientific and philosophical terms. This is why aphorisms work so well. Rather than necessarily spending a book drawing out the details of a single idea, you put a bunch of condensed ideas as various points on a constellation of thought to connect a wider span of understanding, in which it also, if you can make those connections, then the individual who's picking up on it, then it gives them the dignity and the credence to understand that they in fact have the intelligence to fill in the gaps, right? What I see in Western education and thinking is like everything has been dumbed down, and there's always some police agent there. There's always some Karen. There's always some dumbass there to be like, oh no, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. No, we have to corral in what you're thinking. We have to narrow down what you're feeling. We have to deny what you are, what you think, what you feel, blah de blah, right? They'll look right through you as if you're not even there, right? That's how people are. They'll look at your shoes before they look you in the eyes, right? There's many different, back to what he's saying, angles of thought here, right? There's as many angles of thought as there are relative positions in time and space. That means infinite chaos, essentially. So the idea that order is favored over chaos, or that humanity, the idea that one of five great apes could understand the universe, it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a long shot, too. So going on, when a man has mastered this language, then, with its help, there can be transmitted and communicated to him a great deal of knowledge and information which cannot be transmitted in ordinary language, even by using all possible scientific and philosophical terms. Right, so this is letting them um, become self-reliant. Like Nietzsche or Zarathustra says, people who follow me do so because they want to follow themselves. It's not actually all this other nonsense people say it is. It's him pointing out that, hey, out of millennia of thought, we've only recently barely begun to learn how to think, and yet we're still dominated by instincts, impulses, superstitions, basic ape cruelty and egoism and fears and hatred, and a basic drive for power. The fundamental property of the new language is that all ideas in it are concentrated around one idea. That is, they are taken in their manual relationship from the point of view of one idea, mutual relationship from the point of view of one idea, right? So this is a dichotomy, it's a triangle. This idea is the idea of evolution. Of course, not evolution in the sense of mechanical evolution, because such evolution does not exist. But right, because you could argue because we don't even exist on a scale in which we can observe it and say it in some sense. Um, that is, we never get to see the final destination. More so, we can plan for rock falls around a mountain in terms of mechanical weathering, but that may or may not hold. In another conception, you could also say mechanical evolution is irrelevant because it's just simply too slow. You can't rely upon that. You have to take your own education, your own consciousness, your own reverence for yourself and your body seriously, right? Everyone else seems to defer to authorities. They take other people's word for it. Once upon a time, Americans drank radium water because it was marketed as a health tonic. There's going to be countless things into the future. There's going to be countless instances into the future of selling the same old radiated tonics. That this is health, this is knowledge, this is wisdom, this is this is that. No, this is scam artists. No, these are Americans trying to make a living. These are cult members, right? These are people with their own motivations and their own desire for power. So, because such an evolution does not exist, but in the sense of a conscious and volitional evolution, which alone is possible. Again, he's saying unless you're doing it yourself, and he focuses on, remember, personality type and memory. So he's saying, like, unless you can uh, memorize and create a science and art of yourself in which you can then communicate it, like, you're just one more confused person asleep at the wheel. And I don't necessarily agree with old school notions and even Buddhistic notions of like that you can just I don't know, I'll say this, I think no different than them, I don't agree with the present or past beliefs, convictions, assumptions, or even presently mapped out scientific understanding of limits or potentials of the human psyche, of the human spirit, of human passion, of human artwork. I don't think anyone at present knows, and yet everyone for all of history continues to speak as if they do know. So that's what I'm putting forward, that no, they still don't know what they're talking about. No, they still haven't figured it all out. No, despite the appearances and illusions that surround and astound everyone and keep them occupied and busy, that know that evolution in the species doesn't stop here, because man has, through alchemy, through science, through spirituality, through individuation, through all the sorts of bridges that have been kind of defined, all the different ways of seeking consciousness expansion, because there's like this mistake that things can be bought. Why would you buy or seek outside for that which you already possess, right? So we're talking about self-development. We're talking about development of one's own mind that's not actually predicated on other people's assumptions and projections, and which can range from insanity to mundanity. But it's basically, again, another dichotomy within language. And again, everyone gets caught up in dichotomies because that's what suits a plebeian age. We've been over this. So going on, everything in the world, from solar systems to man and from man to atom, either rises or descends. And I've said this, poor rising and descending lines of life. Economic culling to physical culling, it's all a culling. Either evolves or degenerates, either develops or decays, but nothing evolves mechanically. Only degeneration and destructions proceed mechanically. That which cannot evolve consciously degenerates. Help from outside is possibly only, and you could assume basically he's saying if it doesn't actually have a mind to direct itself, it will decay. And I guess you could take a star that turns from brightest object to darkest object. What happens there? Supposedly it's degenerating. Supposedly it's following entropy. What is it? The second law, right? So help from outside is possibly only insofar as it is valued and accepted. Oh, and by the way, again, in case anyone's confused why spirituality and God, why God is dead, well, he was blown up in an atomic blast, right? That physics basically topped all other sciences, including social sciences, so everything became a game of numbers. This is a lot of what Jung talks about, right? Or any kind of more humanist or spiritualist thinker, they usually focus, you can tell based on their personality type, they focus on humanism. They focus on what's the cost of the flesh? How does man feel as a bewildered primate, right? Who can't actually fully understand the world around him, who only ever at any given time has some slice that seems to be pushing in from the beyond, in the sense that it's a mental concept projected onto a physical world. So, going on, that which cannot consciously evolve degenerates. The language in which and that also kind of tells you, uh, I guess it doesn't look too pretty, but if you follow my theory on types as a sort of Olympic rings of circles of civilization and society as constrained through a state, then that's just them in their present manifestation. That's not them in their natural manifestation. This was Christianity giving Eros poison to drink, and then the way that Western idealism and economic systems infected the rest of the world. That's the kind of dominion and totalitarian and monotheistic thinking I'm talking about. The thing that tends towards monotheistic power and consolidation of power through binding so many sensical or nonsensical forces. The language in which understanding is possible is constructed upon the indication of the relation of the object under examination to the evolution possible for it upon the indication of its place in the evolutionary ladder. Wow, this is interesting to me because it's almost a terminology for Nietzsche's science. It's almost a way of conceiving of Nietzsche's place in the pantheon of artistic and philosophical greatness, right? It's in this very concept. So let me reread it. And remember, Nietzsche's been called the disaster for language. The language in which understanding is possible is constructed upon the indication of the relation of the object under examination, and he offers himself up for vigorous examination to the evolution possible for it upon the indication of its place in the evolutionary ladder. So again, ascending or descending lines of life. Speaking of our dinosaurs here, once again, let us take the idea man. In the language of which I speak, instead of the word man, 7 words are used, namely man number 1, man number 2, man number 3, man number 4, man number 5, man number 6, and man number 7. Now, this gets into his personality type, and also he used the engram. For those of you familiar with personality typology, it's not just Jungian typology, there's not just MBTI. Other people use astrology, other people use tarot. There's arguably Western magic has a place here, although I actually like Western magic as a more Zen-like approach in the sense of, hey, what if there aren't countless lives and this is the only life that matters, and it's your evolution therein is the only thing that matters. So you approach your spiritual life with the utmost vigor and need, right? This is how you feed yourself intellectually, spiritually, and bodily. You don't take lessons from other people. You don't just ingest passively. You don't just consume. You create and you squander. You generate yourself and you spend yourself. But it's not just any one thing, and it's not that any one part is more important than other, and it's not that any one human or organization or institution actually fully understands or has understood any and all of this. So I'm not going to go through his whole notion of the evolution of consciousness as can be manifest in the individual. If you look at it from a Jungian perspective, you could almost say this was Gurdjieff trying to map what are stages of individuation. That is, what does the self-seeking soul generate of themselves to then relate and share with the world, whether that changes humanity or harms them, because again, you could argue that truth itself is harmful. But Gurdjieff basically gets into that every man is born man number 1, man number 2, or man number 3, but he talks about it in terms of functions. So again, anyone familiar with MBTI, Jung, right? He says, man number 1, man number 2, man number 3, they constitute mechanical humanity on the same level on which they were born. So he's basically saying, hey, your function as a personality type, there's nothing special about it. It's mechanical. This is how the evolutionary dice shook out. Man number 1 means man in whom, right? And that's where you're going to exist in your place and time unless you expand your mind. So man number 1 means man, right? Think about someone who just reads TV, goes to school, believes what they're told, never seeks outside themselves, never reads a book, seldom takes in new information. What kind of small world do they live in? These are just examples. So I'm not concerned with his theories and ideas of ascendancy or descendancy necessarily, because there's more than one ways to map or do it, but it's that he's talking about the difference between sensors, thinkers, and feelers. So There's the man of the physical body, the man of whom the moving and instinctive functions constantly outweigh the emotional and the thinking functions. Man number two means man on the same level of development, but man in whom the center of gravity is his psychic life and the emotional center. It almost begins to sound gold, silver, and bronze, doesn't it? That is the man in whom the emotional functions outweigh all others. The man of the feeling, the emotional man. Man number three means man of the same level of development, but man in whom the center of gravity is his psychic life lies in the intellectual center. Ooh, the thinker, the scholar, the intellectual. That is the man with whom the thinking functions gain the upper hand over the moving, instinctive, and emotional functions. This is the actual newest function to be indulged. In fact, all of human history was a fight against thinking, right? To this day, people will say you think too much. Don't think. It's troublesome. It's harmful. The joke from the show Futurama is it's a headache with pictures, something like that. So in man number three, it's that thinking goes over instinct and emotion functions. The man of reason, who goes into everything from theories, from mental considerations. Every man is born number one, number two, number three, right? And an old school mystic understanding, the old world models that are still alive and well in the world is the understanding that upon the various paths for a man to take, depending on his type, will be that of the yogi, the monk, or the fakir. These things have no conception hardly or place in a economic world of necessity, slavery, and fine words, because the economic needs make no allowance for the reality of the personality types that predated the organization that was coerced onto and into everyone, and the sort of resentments and thinking that even creates, right, through constraint. So this is where he gets into details. I'm going to skip this because it's not the focus here. If you're interested, you can look into it. I would recommend doing a lot of study before, bothering to come to a conclusion. It's fun to argue for or against ideas, but unless you actually entertain them, especially from the perspectives of how could this be true? How could this be true for a different kind of person who is not myself? Unless you really see that, to see that that's how people see the world, right? That if that's their truth, that's their reality, right? If that's their personality type, that's their reality. It lends itself to its own pre-selected for ontology and way of interacting with the world. Whether the environment is suitable to that personality type is a completely different manner, because, for instance, you can see that an artist and a philosopher actually almost has no place in a brave new world. That is a industrial mechanized world of God and the machine. But from here, Gurdjieff gets into knowledge and the nature of knowledge. And he's talking about distribution. It's almost the Pareto principle, 80-20. There's interesting statistics here, right? So I think it's something like the world is back to the most basic division in personality type or human subspecies, extroversion versus introversion. This is what's interesting, is that there's a 75-25% split in the general human population there. It's interesting and telling to me, well, I know correlation isn't causation, but I think it's fascinating that an organization like Mensa, and I don't know if I mentioned this before because I don't necessarily think that organization means anything, stands for anyone, or actually necessarily helps geniuses per se, other than mainly a social aspect. But supposedly Mensa, you find the inverse correlate, that Mensa is made up of 75% introverts, 25% extroverts. So we get to see these interesting numbers play out, and Gurdjieff is going to address not the numbers, but the kind of principles of force at work behind it all. So during one conversation with Gurdjieff, this is Ouspensky writing, right? This is in, again, to make clear, his book, In Search of the Miraculous. You can find it online if you want to check it out. During one conversation with Gurdjieff in our group, in which was beginning to become permanent, I asked, why, if ancient knowledge has been preserved, and if, speaking in general, there exists a knowledge distinct from our science and philosophy, or even surpassing it, it is so carefully concealed, why is it not made common property? Why are the men who possess this knowledge unwilling to let it pass into the general circulation of life for the sake of a better and more successful struggle against deceit, evil, and ignorance? This is, I think, a question which usually arises in everyone's mind on first acquaintance with the idea of esotericism. Right, the very idea that you're going to find a great secret, that you're going to get something, some enlightenment, something's going to happen, something you're going to obtain is going to suit your ego. Goes on, there are two answers to that, said Gurdjieff. In the first place, this knowledge is not concealed, and in second place, it cannot from its very nature become common property. We will consider the second of these statements first. I will prove to you afterward that knowledge, he emphasized the word, is far more accessible to those capable of assimilating it than is usually supposed. Right, and this is what I interject with while saying right, which is why it's so easy to disrupt learning in and with people, because it's easily disrupted by economic need, by television, psychological operations, perpetual warfare on the human soul from large masses, things like that. So he goes on that the whole trouble is that people either do not want it or cannot receive it. Right, and how many people refusing to read a sign die? Arguably, or who failed to listen, hey, look out for snakes. Accidents don't happen. They weren't paying attention for the snake. The rest of humanity survived just fine alongside the snakes. Not him, though. Not her, though. Kind of goes like that. So, but first of all, another thing must be understood, namely that knowledge cannot belong to all, cannot even belong to many, such as the law. You do not understand this because you do not understand that knowledge, like everything else in the world, is material, right, bodily. It is material, and this means that it possesses all the characteristics of materiality. One of the first characteristics of materiality is that matter is always limited. That is to say, the quantity of matter in a given place and under given conditions is limited. Right, this has been part of the evolution of civilization, was learning that, hey, the first civilizations were always a logistical nightmare because they'd run out of resources, or the environment would change in a way that they were not adapted for. And the only question was, did they both have the technology and the human willpower to live past that filter, or that hard stop, or that chaos, or that unseen factor, right? Because I've said it before, people who see with externally seeing eyes, well, it's really easy to see. Well, no, it's not even easy because the snakes are camouflage, right? So it's supposedly easy to see the dangers of the environment with your external seeing eyes, right? Which comes to the mind like things like common sense. This should be obvious to everyone. Don't you know that, right? This is where a lot of cynicism and ignorance comes from, because people are so jaded at how seemingly dumb people are, when in reality they're witnessing how different people are and where their own perception thereof lies in these constructs of relations, right? These motions of relations, I would say, because again, it's material, not metaphysical. So even the sand of the desert and the water of the sea is a definite and unchangeable quantity, so that if knowledge is material, then it means that there is a definite quantity of it in a given place and time. It may be said that in the course of a certain period of time, say a century, humanity has a definite amount of knowledge at its disposal. But we know even from an ordinary observation of life that the matter of knowledge possesses entirely different qualities according to whether it is taken in small or large quantities. Taken in a large quantity in a given place, that is by one man, let us say, or by a small group of men, it produces very good results. Taken in small quantity, that is by everyone on a large number of people, it gives no results at all, or it may be given negative results, contrary to those expected. Thus, if a certain definite quantity of knowledge is distributed among millions of people, each individual will receive very little, and this small amount of knowledge will change nothing either in his life or in his understanding of things. And however large the number of people who receive this small amount of knowledge, it will change nothing in their lives, except perhaps to make them still more difficult. I agree. This was Nietzsche saying, people spoiled man, like this would be saying people probably spread too many ideas and ideologies amongst all the different types, lending different types to believe in different fantasies of escape from the human condition, whether that was state sanctioned or by God or by yogic mystic practice. It doesn't matter. Everyone's seeking their way out. Everyone's seeking their social status. The ego has its motivations. There's no way around that, right? And the most basic one is survival. And we see that as egoistic creatures, that means the desire and hunger for eternity in a world that denies the very belief and notion of eternity at every juncture, from masses of individuals suppressing the individual human being, right? The irony and oxymoron of it, to knowing that the earth itself has a limited lifespan, right? The civilizations have limited lifespans. This is exactly what Gurdjieff is explaining here. So he's saying that knowledge, knowing, disillusionment actually makes life harder, because now they're suffering from abstractions and not just, it's one thing just to say, hey, life kind of sucks, but at least there's nowhere to go. At least you know this is true everywhere. And now the idea is implanted that there's an escape, there's a revolution, there's a way out. And depending on who's teaching you, that could be crazy. That could be a UFO following in the tail of a comet. It could be meditation, meditating your life away when you could be examining any number of other practices or ideas that would be better suited for your personality type, right? I could go on and on. But if, on the contrary, large quantities of knowledge are concentrated in a small number of people, then this knowledge will gain very great results. Think of philosophers and thinkers over all of history. The ones we remember are the people he's talking about. The people who influenced everyone the most because they consolidated the knowledge that was available at the time, because everyone else was too busy fighting wars and, just doing whatever humans do, the normal mundane stuff of human life, not interested in collecting or generating knowledge or culture or art. From this point of view, it is far more advantageous that knowledge should be preserved among a small number of people and not dispersed among the masses. If we take a certain quantity of gold and decide to gild a number of objects with it, we must know or calculate exactly what number of objects can be gilded with the quantity of gold. If we try to gild a greatest number, right, this is the mistake of Eros under Christianity. It's what made it poisonous, was saying, hey, here's one block of gold in which we can gild the world. And not that anyone was going to share that anyway. They replaced it with pyrite and kind of said, well, I hope the illusion of the production is good enough. So if we try to gild a greater number, they will be covered with gold unevenly in patches, and it will look much worse as if they had no gold at all. In fact, we shall lose our gold, right? And then you could think of a saying like, don't put your pearls before swine, which is arguably what Christianity became. Right, the person who fought against state and church became a state and church by other people's own misunderstanding and intentional censorship of the development of the Christian belief system and spirituality. So this distribution of knowledge is based upon exactly the same principle. If knowledge is given to all, nobody will get any. Right? It's like saying if everyone's talking, no one's there to listen. If it is preserved among a few, each will receive not only enough to keep, but to increase what he receives. And I think it's no different. I think future humanity is going to look back. They're not going to remember billions of people. They're going to remember a handful of people, because there's simply too many nodes, too much chaos, not enough sense making. So the individuals who are remembered for their knowledge, for their philosophy, for their beliefs, for their science, for their art, whatever it is, they're remembered again for specific reasons. Or if they're geniuses of the body, right? They're athletes, they're soldiers, they're those kinds of positions. So there is more than one type of genius. Remember, we're talking bronze, silver, gold. So at first glance, this theory seems very unjust, since the position of those who are, so to speak, denied knowledge in order so that others may receive a greater share appears to be very sad. And I'm saying it's not sad. I'm saying it's personality, and undeservedly harder than it ought to be. Actually, however, this is not so at all, and in the distribution of knowledge, there is not the slightest injustice. Right? I've said this before, no one's where they shouldn't be. No one's getting cheated here. No one, yes, being born, the biggest divide is being born in family and networks, and art, which is arguably money, and one leads to the other, right? So there's that, but beyond that, let me repeat that. In the distribution of knowledge, there is not the slightest injustice. What there is inequality as a fact of human life, always has been, always will be, the greatest injustice being in genetics themselves. So the fact that it is enormous majority of people that do not want any knowledge whatever, they refuse. This is what Terence McKenna would talk about, right? He said there's countless millions of Americans living larval lives consuming 8 hours of television a day, not doing any thinking or feeling for themselves. They react to the world. Their whole motivations are economic, right? Or they're chasing delusions and illusions, right? Kind of goes on from here. They refuse their share of it and do not even take the ration allotted to them. In the general distribution for the purposes of life, and you could arguably say we see this in history. In all history, there are the Luddites. In all history, there are the people who want to stand still or move backwards, and what happens to them? They get destroyed, they get consumed. I'm not necessarily saying that those people didn't have good ideas or good genetics, only that they didn't exist in a configuration in the world that led to their survival. If something is destroyed, it doesn't mean it wasn't superior, right? There's this illusion that if something dies, there's this illusion that if something's successful means it's good, right? If something's unsuccessful, it was bad, wrong. This is just human mythology. These are people using their minds to create doers out of deeds. It's an utter fiction. So going on, it says, this is particularly evident in times of mass madness, such as wars, revolutions, and so on, when men suddenly seem so to lose even the small amount of common sense that they had and turn into complete automatons or zombies, giving themselves over to wholesale destructions in vast numbers. Right? It's like, I like the explanation in the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? Hey, look, the world's overpopulated. Like there's far too many gods and heroes. We need to start culling. And then you see in human history, it was a story of that to the tunes of millions, just sending wave after wave of, I don't even want to say men, because a lot of these men were in fact young boys who barely could grow a mustache, right? So barely getting their first mustaches and gunned down, charging a hill head on to just what was guaranteed destruction. And you look back and you go, why? You go, well, because it was there. You got to use it or you admit it's pointless, right? That is the nihilism at the end of culture's rope. So the idea was that this progression served a story, and then that was blown apart in the nihilistic, atomistic postmodern age, where both sides of the pendulum just come to a standstill, where history ceases, where time stops, where God dies, where knowledge is accrued in an infinitely building up stratum because we've reached light speed, meaning once you hit light speed, there's nowhere to go to. So people are just left to stew in their own consciousness. What I said of the general low level of people's beings is that resentment is at least honest, whereas everyone else sublimates it. And honestly, you can see that they get caught up in their own fantasies too. And they, arguably the best party believers, the best cult believers are the people who take it realistically, which is passionately, which is exactly the kind of madness and revolutions that he's talking about. Or as Nietzsche said, that insanity is actually, madness is rare in individuals, but when it comes to groups, revolutions, politics, and ages, madness is the rule. Not just the norm, but the rule. So in that, we have a different process taking place than what the progressive process of history was teaching that got blown up and is dead in its own water. So owing to this, right, everyone losing their basically the group madness is to consent to destruction, mutual, self, and otherwise. So owing to this, enormous quantities of knowledge remain, so to speak, unclaimed and can be distributed among those who realize its value. And Gurdjieff goes on, there's nothing unjust in this. These are just the value tables. They've been there since day one for any artist, shaman, or thinker, or feeler, or sensor to tap into in whatever ways available, right? The idea of the feeling of any kind of transcendence in power in its manifestations, right? Intelligence being one of those. Because those who receive knowledge take nothing that belongs to others, deprive others of nothing. They take only what others have rejected as useless and what would in any case be lost if they did not take it. I think every historian and alternate historian putting down their take. They're doing the accounting that others have or haven't. So people generally, they repeat what other people have repeated, or they're taking down new and different information. So the collecting of knowledge by some depends on the rejection of knowledge by others. There are periods in the life of humanity which generally coincide with the beginning of the fall of cultures and civilizations, when the masses irretrievably lose their reason and begin to destroy everything that has been created by centuries and millenniums of culture. Good morning, America. Such periods of mass madness often coincide with geological cataclysms, hello world, Climactic changes and similar phenomena of a planetary character release a very great quantity of matter of knowledge. This, in its turn, necessitates the work of collecting this matter of knowledge, which would otherwise be lost. Right? And think about it. So now, even if we have more people collecting knowledge, that just means more knowledge that even the seekers of knowledge won't have time to sort, correlate, make sense of. Right? So it's infinitely expanding and ejecting its matter, seemingly like a black hole. Thus, the work of collecting scattered matter of knowledge frequently coincides with the beginning of the destruction of the fall of cultures and civilizations. Arguably, yes, because by the time we're at a point when thinkers and scientists can put their lives forward, that's only because the cops and crazies who run the joint, who run the asylum, have released a little bit of their power. Okay, we're going to brutalize you less. Maybe we're going to stop chopping off ears and heads and fingers. Maybe we're going to stop just killing you for fun and amusement, right? However, these things tend to play out over the history of a civilization. I'm going to take I got to take 5 here, but I'm going to resume with, oh shoot, man, this is long. All right, resuming here with Gurdjieff's, or rather Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, which is on George Gurdjieff and his teachings, namely personality types, theories on knowledge, things like that. Basically, Gurdjieff is offering a completely alternate take to the Western misconception and illusion that's taught as Whig history, progressive history, Enlightenment history, and even boiled down to our modern day left-right politics, which still follows a logical internal and external narrative that is a reaction of, to, and for itself and the people who make up its political body, right? These masses of individuals and their own individual conceptions of their reality that constitute any so-called group, right? Whether or not they know what they're doing or they're a part of is another matter. But Gurdjieff is saying that none of those theories and ideas are true. What I was pointing out about nihilism, and that the reason why it's hard for anyone to swallow once you step outside the narrow, childlike bounds of culture, is you see that there's no one in control, that knowledge in the world and man aren't what people say and think and assume it is, that civilization is not, and that even the theory of like, oh, we've developed knowledge as this noble endeavor of science to better the world and help people understand, that all these things, even the most basic logical narrative and its collectivism, fall down, because in reality the whole rise and fall of a people, of an empire, of a civilization is the story of a creation and collection and dissemination of knowledge that is selected for by those who are or aren't paying attention, right? So it's a completely alternate view of history and understanding. And the reason why the people who are a part of it all and who consider themselves as part of this story and these narratives and these delusions is that you either use what's there or you admit it's useless, right? So no one, like the whole thing is like, you're not allowed to be honest about it, right? This is why culture has decorum, because honesty isn't allowed. And then the fun becomes, well, what can you get away with before people get upset, right? And there's the invention of comedy, and there's, you know, the invention of all other art to say, okay, if we're this repressive, how do I sneak a vision in? How do we bring our dream into reality if everyone's basically trying to plug holes in the ship of fools in perpetuity, right? It's a serious problem that everyone living has to deal with. So Gurdjieff goes on, this aspect of the question is clear. The crowd neither wants nor seeks knowledge, and the leaders of the crowd, in their own interests, try to strengthen its fear and dislike of everything new and unknown. The slavery in which mankind lives is based upon this fear. It is even difficult to imagine all the horrors of this slavery. We do not understand what people are losing. But in order to understand the cause of this slavery, it is enough to see how people live, what constitutes the aim of their existence, the objective of their desires, passions, and aspirations, of what they think, of what they talk, what they serve, and what they worship, right? How do they spend their time? Where does their mind occupy the most time and space, right? This is what I mentioned before about the quintessential and fundamental human vibe check, right? Like, hey, given the circumstances of your life, what did you create out of it? What did you do? Oh, again, you see with most people, where applicable, they take the easiest route. They take the route that was created for them by someone else. And that's, again, but that's falling in line with social order. So it's quite natural, especially if you're born into a good position. Everyone else struggles at the bottom or from the bottom, right? So there are vast differences and gulfs from where people originate, whether that's personality type or the position of their birth in space and time, right? So that idea, again, that anything goes, this is why the Greek idea of not just a pagan god system, but a faded tapestry of human existence was far more accurate as to the human condition. So consider what the culture humanity of our time spends money on, even leaving the war out. What commands the highest price? Where the biggest crowds are? If we think for a moment about these questions, it becomes clear that humanity, as it is now with the interests it lives by, cannot expect to have anything different from what it has. Oh, so he's talking about the future, right? So this is why we have idealism, and this is why the present is the future of the future, because they can't have anything different from what they have, because they don't seek anything different. The myth was that people were seeking enlightenment and reason and knowledge. No, 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 no. But as I've already said, it cannot be otherwise. Imagine that for the whole of mankind, half a pound of knowledge is allotted a year. If this knowledge is distributed among everyone, each will receive so little he will remain the fool he was. But thanks to the fact that very few want to have this knowledge, those who take it are able to get it, let us say a grain each, and acquire the possibility of becoming more intelligent. All cannot become more intelligent even if they wish. And if they did become intelligent, it would not help matters. There exists a general equilibrium which cannot be upset. Right, so this is what I was saying, 80-20, subspecies, 75-20, Mensa, 25-75. You know, it kind of just seems like knowledge and genius and certain things like that are just very locked in. Like these are unchanging numbers, leaving out ideas of genetic or technological modification. You know, the other side of it that I've mentioned in passing is that I don't think humanity has remotely begun to tap into potentials in the development of human consciousness and our intuitive and sensory and feeling capacities and our thinking capacities, because that's not high on anyone's list, as Gurdjieff is saying, right? Where do the biggest crowds gather? Where is with the most money invested, right? It's not in thought, it's not in thinking, it's not in the development of human consciousness and superordinate powers in the domains of intuition, introversion, those kinds of things. That is one aspect. The other, as I've already said, consists in the fact that no one is concealing anything. I've said this before. Nothing is hidden. There's no mystery whatsoever. But the acquisition or transmission of true knowledge demands great labor and great effort, both of him who receives and him who gives. It was like Nietzsche said, to be a friend, you'd have to be able to be capable of taking the love of an overflowing hearts. You'd have to be capable of being a sponge, right? So, and those who possess this knowledge are doing everything that they can to transmit and communicate it to the greatest possible number of people, right? Like most of our ideas are still ancient. They've been around forever. It's not that complicated. To facilitate people's approach to it and enable them to prepare themselves to receive the truth. But knowledge cannot be given by force to anyone, and as I've already said, an unprejudiced survey of the average man's life, of what fills his day, and of all the things he's interested in, will at once show whether it is possible to accuse men who possess knowledge of concealing it, right? Of not wishing to give it to people, or of not wishing to teach people that they know themselves. So right now, I could point out, and people have elsewhere in the most shallow aspects of our culture, people will say time and time again, all the knowledge of humanity at people's fingertips, and of course, cat videos and other things like that are far more enjoyable, far more mindless, far more feel-good, sentimental, delusional, idealistic, whatever it is people are chasing. It's not actual knowledge. It's not actual knowledge. It's not development of human thinking, of human consciousness. It's none of that. If you survey the average man, it will show at once whether it is possible to accuse men who possess knowledge of concealing it. of not wishing to give it to people. Right, and when all the knowledge is out there, when professors have been teaching for thousands of years, when teachers have been transmitting directly to their students for thousands of years, people are waiting for some sort of evolution or revolution or enlightenment, right? You seeing what I'm saying here? Are you seeing what he's saying here? He who wants knowledge must himself make the initial efforts to find the source of knowledge and to approach it, right? Like I said, why would you look elsewhere in the world? You possess, you're awash in, you consist of, you're mutually arising in, you're a part of. I don't know how many different perceptions I can frame it from, but in theory, you already possess the most powerful thing and the most immense power the human animal possesses, right? Why would you look outside yourself for an answer or for another power? So going from there, right, I would be, imagine, okay, it's like to me it's like a lion pulling out its claws and its teeth. It's like a snake getting rid of its muscular body or its venom glands, right? Take any animal, completely disempower it, and that's the direction that the animal man easily tends towards, either descending lines of life or ascending lines of life. And we know what the animal body is. That's clear. We've seen it every day. Yeah, it's apparent to see what an animal body can do because this earth is covered with them. So from there, what is left? And like I said, we have the realm of human consciousness, the development of intuition, sensing, introversion, feeling, and then the creative process that has given birth to everything that is in the world. So, or everything that is in the human world specifically. So he who wants knowledge must himself make the initial efforts. So he's saying the student must make the initial efforts of discernment, find the source, approach it, takes advantage of help and indications which are given to all, but which people, as a rule, do not want to see or recognize. And honestly, I think a lot of this is it's the basic ego, right? Does not want to recognize that there is any rank or order to the world, especially when it comes to thinking, and especially if you can recognize in a rank order of how great thinkers and artists are, where does one and others truly stand on that scale? I think it's because people don't want to acknowledge it, because it would probably require an ego death if they realize the profound difference in different types of humanity. So anyway, from there, knowledge cannot come to people without effort on their own part. They understand this very well in connection with ordinary knowledge, but in the case of great knowledge, when they admit the possibility of its existence, they find it possible to expect something different. Everyone knows very well what if, for instance, a man wants to learn Chinese, it will take several years of intense work. Everyone knows that 5 years are needed to grasp the principles of medicine, and perhaps twice as many years for the study of painting or music. And yet there are theories which affirm that knowledge can come to people without any effort on their part, that they can acquire it while asleep. Think of autosuggestion, hypnosis, even things like speed reading, right? Even like all the little life hacks and all the little, oh, this is going to make things easier for you. Gurdjieff is pointing out the all too human truth is that people are looking for the easy way out, whereas it's like, no, these are the new struggles. These are the eternal struggles, and one is either challenging oneself or one is decaying, one is becoming less. The very existence of such theories constitutes an additional explanation of why knowledge cannot come to people. At the same time, it is essential to understand that man's independent efforts to attain anything in this direction can also give no results. Man can only attain knowledge with the help of those who possess it. This must be understood from the very beginning. One must learn from him who knows. Yes, this is the oldest trick in the book. My question is, at what point does any teacher overextend their welcome and become a hindrance, right? In categories of man, woman, and child, you'd say it's a common thing for all history that parents devour their children or use their children, right? From here, it's kind of more of what would be considered his esoteric theory. If you're familiar with the language and the symbolism and the history, it's less confusing, but to anyone else, it's going to be the most confusing and misleading things in the world. So I'm not going to delve into that for the moment, but he does get more into language, which I will read because, people have questions and answers, and, Gurdjieff shakes his head and he says, "You're speaking of something different," he said. You speak of errors arising from perceptions, but I am not speaking of these. Within the limits of given perceptions, man can err more or less. As I have said before, man's chief delusion is his conviction that he can do. All people think that they can do. All people want to do, right? Because they want to be, and what do they want to be? And the first question of all people ask is, what are they to do? But actually, nobody does anything and nobody can do anything. This is the first thing that must be understood. Everything happens, all that befalls a man, all that is done by him, all that comes from him, all that happens. And it happens in exactly the same way rain falls as a result of change in temperature in the high regions of the atmosphere or the surrounding clouds, as snow melts under the rays of the sun, as dust rises with the wind. Man is a machine. All his deeds, actions, words, thoughts, feelings, convictions, opinions, and habits are a result of external influences, external impressions. Out of himself, a man cannot produce a single thought, a single action. Everything he says, everything he does, he thinks, he feels, all this happens. Right, and I've talked about this. Nietzsche's antipathy to time, which is to say that the will can't roll backwards. That, Nietzsche's idea was to become a self-rolling wheel, to consolidate even Gurdjieff's esoteric teachings of the first three basic mechanical types of man evolving into any kind of higher being. Think of Zarathustra or Nietzsche's metaphor of the camel, the lion, and the child. But what it is the orientation of a self-rolling wheel. It's a self-enterprise, a self-endeavor. The idea that other people are doing it, can do it, or will do it, that's not enough for anyone themselves. It doesn't mean anything at all. So, going on, everything he says, it all just happens, he's a machine. To establish this fact for itself, to understand it, to be convinced of its truth, means getting rid of thousands of illusions about man, about his being creative and consciously organizing his own life, right? Illusions of freedom, of will, and so on. There's nothing of this kind. Everything happens. Popular movements, wars, revolutions, changes of government, all this happens. And it happens in exactly the same way everything has happened in the life of individual man. Man is born, lives, dies, builds houses, writes books, not as he wants to, but as it happens. Everything happens. Man does not love, hate, desire, all this happens. But no one will ever believe you if you tell him that he can do nothing. Right, this is what I said. You have to use it, or you believe it's, or you recognize it's pointless. This is the most offensive and the most unpleasant thing you can tell people. It is particularly unpleasant and offensive because it is the truth, and nobody wants to know the truth. When you understand this, it will be easier for us to talk. Right? Again, the idealist, the delusional, they really think there's some line of rational thought that it can clue people in. They think there's some mystic path that will fix humanity, when that's been the oldest medicine and often the oldest trick in the book. So, and now a lot of that material is just further behind, and as bodies of individuals, i.e. bodies of knowledge, are further developed, those kind of teachings and ways and ideas will only fall further behind in superstition and shadows, stuck in their caves, stuck in their shadows, because they're arrested in development in place and time. So he goes on, when you understand this, it will be easier for us to talk, right? No more delusions, no more illusions, no more projecting your nonsense onto a world that just doesn't hold it. So, but it's one thing to, right, and like, imagine being so out of touch with the human body and its evolution that you can no longer tell the difference. That would begin to maybe resemble insanity or mass delusion. But it goes on. But it's one thing to understand with the mind and another thing to feel it with one's whole mass. Ooh, he's talking about a center of gravity, perhaps. To be really convinced that it is this and to never forget it, right? To not lose oneself, to not forget your own memory, to not see that consecutive self-rolling wheel that's been generated over a lifetime of work. With this question of doing, G emphasized the word, right? Because G's whole thing was like, hey, don't go to India to search for enlightenment, go to work. Be a human being. Look into yourself, your motivations. Everything else becomes an externalized distraction. You're chasing butterflies. You're chasing realms created by other people and things. You're reacting to things you don't even understand. You already have a million assumptions about yourself and the world. How could you even begin to understand or know anything, right? The idea is absurd. Yet another thing, he goes on, is connected. It always seems to people that others invariably do things wrongly, not in the way it should be done, right? And I said a lot of this is just type differences. People go my way of thinking, my way of sensing, my way of orienting and feeling and judging and moralizing. That's the right way, right? And you go, oh shit, There's millions and billions of these egomaniacs. Oh, geez, right? So particularly what has already been done one way cannot see and could not have been done in another way. Have you noticed how everyone now is talking about the war, right? 1917, around thereabouts. Everyone has his own plan, his own theory. Everyone finds that nothing is being, it can be, everyone finds that nothing is being done in the way it ought to be done. Actually, everything is being done in only the way it can be done. If one thing could be differently, everything could be different, right? So he's deconstructing Platonism. He's deconstructing idealism. He's deconstructing Western illusion. And he didn't need a major in Western philosophy or any kind of politically oriented literature to do so. And then perhaps there would have never been a war. Try to understand what I'm saying. Everything is dependent on everything else. Everything is connected, nothing is separate. Therefore, everything is going in the only way it can go, right? Like I said, those Olympic rings connected, meeting in a few places, but nowhere else. This is personality type. This is what shaped not just evolution in our natural lives as human beings, but also has shaped our lives since the state took over. People playing their roles, people worshiping as such. So if people were different, everything would be different. They were what they are, so everything is as it is. This was very difficult to swallow. Is there nothing, absolutely nothing that can be done, I asked. So this is Ouspensky asking Gurdjieff. Absolutely nothing. And can nobody do anything? That is another question, Gurdjieff says. In order for it to do, necessary to be, and is necessary first to understand. So, he is basically saying it's ambered in time. He has his own beliefs and ideas and all that kinds of things, but he does point out and make clear that, all these illusions, they run themselves, and the factory's been set up and organized thus, in a mechanical world and in a world where man has built a God in the machine. So getting to the end of the road of the disillusionment, Gurdjieff is saying, yes, that is because people believe in progress in culture, said Gurdjieff. There is no progress whatsoever. Everything is just the same as it was thousands and tens of thousands of years ago, right? This is not just the eternal recurrence, it's personality types. It's the basic organizational structure of how it's been. The outward form changes, the essence does not change. Man remains just the same. Civilized and cultured people live with exactly the same interests and as the most ignorant savages. Modern civilization is based on violence and slavery and fine words, but all these fine words about progress and civilization are merely words. This has, of course, produced a particularly deep impression on us because it was said in 1916, when the latest manifestation of civilization in the form of a war such as the world had never before seen, what I say, just wave after wave of men and boys for the slaughter, was continuing to grow and develop, drawing more and more millions of people into its orbit. And so Ouspensky mentions seeing a lorry, right, a truck full of crutches going down the street. I think this is in Moscow or Constantinople or whatever. But and he mentions it to Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff says, what do you expect? People are machines. Machines have to be blind and unconscious. They cannot be otherwise. All their actions have to correspond to their nature. Everything happens, no one does anything. Progress and civilization, in the real meaning of these words, can appear only as a result of conscious efforts. They cannot appear as a result of unconscious mechanical actions. And what conscious effort can there be in machines? Well, you build a crutch to fix the broken machine, the machine that you broke. And if one machine is unconscious, then 100 machines are unconscious. And so are 1,000 machines, or 100,000, or a million. And he ends here saying, and the conscious activity of a million machines must necessarily result in destruction and extermination. And history seems to bear this out, right? So, and what Gurdjieff said to Ouspensky at the time will come when you will understand. And I think the bloodbath of that previous century is exactly what he was talking about. And even spookier to think that what if that's not yet the worst to come? But on that idea that nothing progresses, nothing changes, it's precedented. Before even Gurdjieff was writing and working there, I have Emerson's Self-Reliance, and this bridges and dovetails nicely here to fit in on the talk and what I think the next video will be about. Emerson in Self-Reliance, he's talking about history, society, man. He goes, as our religion, our education, our art look abroad, right? So does our spirit of society. All men plume themselves on the improvement of society, and no man improves. And now it's like, good luck getting anyone admitting that anything's been improved at all, right? That's kind of what the argument is. So society never advances. It recedes as fast as one side of it gains on the other. It undergoes continual changes. It is barbarous. It is civilized. It is Christianized. It is rich. It is scientific. But this change is not amelioration, right? For everything that is given, something is taken. Does this sound familiar? It kind of sounds like what we just read in Gurdjieff. Uh, Society acquires new arts and loses old instincts. The civilized man has built a coach but has lost the use of his feet. He is supported on crutches but lacks... Jesus. Okay. Um, the civilized man has built a coach but has lost the use of his feet. He is supported on crutches but lacks so much support of muscle. He has a fine Geneva watch, but he fails of the skill to tell by the hour of a sun. A Greenwich nautical almanac he has, and so being sure of the information when he wants it, the man in the street does not know a star in the sky. The solstice he does not observe, right? With Google in his pocket, with Google and AI in their pocket, they still don't know anything. The equinox he knows as little as the whole bright calendar of this year is without a dial in his mind, right? No more reflection of the outer world, no more home, no more cosmos where man exists. His notebook impairs his memory. His library overloads his wit, right? All his technology cripples him. The insurance office increases the number of accidents, and it may be, and the rest of us are stuck paying for it, and it may be a question whether machinery does not encumber, whether we may have not lost by refinement some energy. Yes, lost a lot of vitality by Christian and apparently hormonal balances in terms of sanity and mental illness as well. By Christianity entrenched in establishment and forms, some vigor of wild virtue. For every Stoic was a Stoic, but in Christendom, where is the Christian? Right? You can see Epictetus, you can see Marcus Aurelius. Uh, there is no more deviation in the moral standard than in the standard of height or bulk. No greater men are now than were ever before. A singular equality may be observed between the great men of the first and the last ages, nor can all the science, art, religion, and philosophy of the 19th century avail to educate greater men than Plutarch's heroes 3 or 4 and 20 centuries ago. Not in time is the race progressive. Phocion, Socrates, Anaxagoras, Diogenes are great men, but they leave no class. He who is really of their class will not be called by their name, but he will be his own man. Yes, this is what Emerson says. To be a man, you have to be yourself. If you're hiding behind someone else's mask, how could we even see you to judge you, right? How could we see you to know that you're a human being or a man? Like, what are you hiding in there, right? These are the oldest cultural inspection. Let us see what you really are. Class will not be called by their name. They will be their own man, and in turn the founder of a sect. The arts and inventions of each period are only its costume, and do not invigorate men. Like I said, they become a push and a pull, but they're not the end-all be-all. The harm of the improved machinery may compensate its good. Hudson and Bering accomplished so much in their fishing boats as to astonish Perry and Franklin. So he's talking about how so many people do so much with so less, whose equipment exhausted the resources of science and art. Galileo, with an opera glass, discovered a more splendid series of celestial phenomena than anyone ever since. Columbus found the New World in its undecked boat. It is curious to see the periodical disuse and perishing of means and machinery, which were introduced with loud laudation a few years or centuries before. You remember the fax machine, the answering machine, so many machines that are now simply obsolete. Right, and I know that people have fetishes and desires for old technologies, and radio's still around, telegram's still around, and these things likely will be. But getting to the point here, obsolescence is what we're talking about. We reckon the improvements of the art of war among the triumphs of science, and yet Napoleon conquered Europe by the bivouac, which consisted of falling back on naked valor and the disencumbering of all of its aids. Right, so he found strength in the human body once more. Right, it was one of those last gasps against a dying age and a dying way of life. And now it's illegal for things like that to even happen. It's just called terrorism. There's a whole different class and way of life now. The emperor held it's impossible to make a perfect army, says Las Casas, without abolishing our arms, magazines, commissaries, and carriages, until, in imitation of Roman custom, the soldier should receive his supply of corn, grind it in his hand mill, and bake his bread himself. He's talking about self-sufficiency. He's saying every modern person has it too easy. This is Zaphian territory, the retirement of not just the body, but all of our senses, our intuition, our thinking. The more we rely on external circumstances, people, things, and the illusion of security and authority, the more you lose touch with the strength and instincts of the body, the growth and development of one's own consciousness and its place in the real world, not in the projected imaginary world that Gurdjieff was discussing, or that kind of even Emerson, before America became modern America, he's already dissected and left it up for reinspection at the hands of those who have the kind of ability to tap into what you would call an oversoul. Because it seems to me the larger artistic and scientific vision of the political world is just doom and gloom. It's nothing but bad news despite the progress, right? So the schizophrenia of the culture, supposedly values life, aborted like hundreds of millions of people, right? There's no reconciling how schizophrenic the modern narratives or in the culture and the politics are. Emerson here is one of America's greatest treasures, right? You could probably get rid of the country and he alone would justify it. I used to think it was maybe some of our more modern arts, but honestly, I don't, with those kind of having reached their peak, they already have their place in a kind of pantheon of art and expression of being and life. And then past that, it's like, well, did we have any philosophers? Did we have any thinkers? Well, we used to have an Emerson. We had a Thoreau. We had a few good authors and writers. We continue to create a few here and there. But out of hundreds of millions, it's actually, I think, if we cleared the stage of all the hack and crap work, it would be a very few number of people actually working and creating or doing anything new, not including what people are just repeating what's already been done. It's still a small theater, and we're not even in a place to curate or understand or see it all yet. So Emerson says, society is a wave. The wave moves onward, but the water of which it is composed does not. And I could say this of human consciousness. And what I'm also saying is that what's not even in Emerson here is that we don't even put a focus on this. We don't actually develop human capacity. We don't develop what is our superpowers: introversion, intuition, the ability to make something out of that, the seemingly to turn unreality into reality, to make what's invisible to all visible to all, right? We don't take it seriously. It's constrained only for one purpose, which is why society is a wave, right? Historically and otherwise. The waves move onward, but the water of which it is composed does not. Again, those personality types, those rings, that hasn't changed. The same particle does not rise from the valley to the ridge. Its unity is only phenomenal. The persons who make up a nation today, next year die, and their experience with them. This is part of why Gurdjieff says we never know what we're actually losing in a body. And then Emerson goes on with his critique. And so the reliance on property, including the reliance on governments which protect it, is the want of self-reliance. Men have looked away from themselves, right, because you can extrovert the value of things, agree on it, and then there's where your sense of self and self-esteem comes from themselves and things, so long that they have come to esteem the religious, learned, and civil institutions as guards of property. Right? It has nothing to do with the intellect, nothing to do with human consciousness. It's all just property and ownership. And they depreciate assaults on these because they feel them to be assaults on property. Right? He's saying they depreciate assaults on the institutions, the beliefs, the ideas. Right? They conflate ideas and property. This is how insane they are. They measure their esteem of each other by what each has, not by what each is. I've been over this. I've been covering this on my channel for like months now. I'm going to show you the mistake again in Western and especially American culture. They measure their esteem of each other by what each has and not by what each is. Right? This was Gurdjieff saying they have no regard for other people's higher level of being and no sense of shame or understanding for their own low level of being. So, but a cultivated man becomes ashamed of his property out of the respect for his nature. Ooh, this was and thus spake Zarathustra echoes this when Nietzsche writes, The man, when dice falls in a man's favor, he will question himself, am I not an honest player? And I would say no. I'd say, because the whole idea is that someone can achieve success in this world, right? This is the American dream. It's about success in the world. But what no one's ever honest about is their position of starting success, meaning you need a family, you need a network, you need a already cleared out channel to make money and socialize. And absent that, you are outside of what is considered the heights of culture. And it's actually, as Nietzsche said, it's the opposite. These people have become the enemies of culture. They're Philistines. Their notion of thinking is the limiting of consciousness, not the expansion thereof. So a cultivated man becomes ashamed of his property. Especially, he hates what he has if he sees it as accidental. Exactly. This is why Zarathustra says, if something falls in my favor, how could I be an honest actor, especially if I'm not honest to others about what that is? So it came to him by inheritance or a gift or a crime. Right? In America, like I said, it's all about privatism and piratism. Uh, Came to him by inheritance or gift or crime, then he feels he is not having, it does not belong to him. Oh man, it's like the opposite. You see that people don't even think about it. They have no sense of shame, no sense of, they just have a sense of ownership. Has no root in him and merely lies there, because no revolution and no robber takes it away. But that which a man does always be by necessity acquire, and what the man acquires is living property, which does not wait the beck of rulers or mobs or revolutions or fire or storm or bankruptcies or live in service thereto, but perpetually renews itself wherever the man breathes. Thy lot a portion of life, said the Caliph Ali, is seeking after thee, therefore be it the rest from seeking it, right? As I said earlier, you already have it. What are you looking for? Oh my God, they got it so backwards. But it's actually works in everybody and nobody's favor for it to be backwards, which is the truth that nothing is hidden and nothing is wrong. Just a lot of fear, I'd argue, that rules the world. So anyway, this has been a discussion and exploration of knowledge, thought, language, being. The texts read were, again, psychologists, Russian psychologists, P.D. Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, throughout some quotations and references to Nietzsche. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. If you're interested, go check it out. And I'll likely be covering it next, and then probably The Greek State by Nietzsche. So thanks again for checking out the channel. Like, share, subscribe. You got to hit the notification bell if you actually want to be notified. Yet if your social media is like mine, it's very inconsistent, and the timing is always off. But anyway, I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.